payload counter on my logistics panel read 4.7 metric units of strain Veth-Sorvain. Enough, the Directorate's deployment models assured us, to render the atmosphere of a second human colony non-viable within 72 hours of dispersal. I had filed the dispersal authorization myself, 3 standard days prior, stamped it with my coordinator's seal and routed it up the chain without a second thought. That is the part I return to, now when I cannot sleep. We were 9 hours from the target colony when the transit signatures appeared. Not one. Not a patrol frigate or an armed courier. The scanner array on my survey tender. A small craft, non-combat, parked at the convoy's trailing edge to log the dispersal event for Directorate. Towards. Registered 17 distinct mass emergence events simultaneously at bearing 271, range 40,000 kilometers in closing. Flagged the readings to convoy commander, Veth-Sorvain aboard the lead dispersal carrier. His response came back in 11 seconds. Transit noise. Log it and continue approach. I logged it. I continued to watch. The 17 contacts did not scatter as transit noise does. They held formation, a wedge, tight and precise, the kind of geometric coherence that requires active coordination between hulls. I ran the mass estimates again, because the first pass had returned values I assumed were corrupted. They were not corrupted. The lead hull alone was registering at 1.4 kilometers bow to stern. The flanking hulls ran smaller, between 800 and 900 meters each, trailing 4. The ones that sat at the wide base of the wedge were 1.1 kilometers and showing power signatures I had no bracket for. 17 hulls. Total combined mass, somewhere above what our entire propagation fleet combat arm could field in this sector. I sent a second flag to Veth-Sorvain. Commander, these contacts are not transit noise. They are formed up and inbound. I am not finding any matching hull profiles in the registry. I cannot identify origin, class, or designation. I am not finding registration signals. Pause before his reply was longer this time. 18 seconds. They have not hailed us. If they were hostile, they would hail us first. Standard protocol. Standard protocol. I remember thinking those words and feeling for the first time particular discomfort of realizing that the entity closing on us at 0.4 standard velocities might not operate under standard protocol. Might not, in fact, be bound by any procedural framework the Directorate had ever encountered. They had not hailed us. They were simply there, they were coming, and the scanner kept returning the same numbers no matter how many times I recalculated. The lead hull was now visible on the optical array. I put it on my secondary screen and looked at it for a long time. It was dark. The hull plating was layered and mismatched, panels of different shades, different wear states, as though the ship had been repaired so many times, over so many years, that no 2 sections remembered the same origin. Scorch marks ran in long diagonal streaks across the forward sections. The engine ports were not glowing. The drives were at low power. It was not rushing. It was not demonstrating anything. It was simply moving toward us at a steady, unhurried pace. The way a thing moves when it has already decided what it is going to do, and has no need to announce it. I pulled the Directorate's human contact archive, the full compendium, everything catclossled in the 17 years since we had first assessed human military capacity as low to moderate threat, non-priority engagement. The archive had no entry for a hull of this silhouette. Nothing close. The closest match was a theoretical classification, filed 8 years ago by an assessor who had apparently flagged a concern about human shipbuilding rates and been formally reassigned. At 30,000 kilometers, the lead hull's weapons systems came online. I know this because the power signature shifted, a massive sudden draw that my scanner registered as a separate event, as though a second ship had appeared inside the first one and powered up. The flanking hulls followed in sequence, each one 3 seconds after the last, a cascade, deliberate, as though they wanted us to hear it, each one separately, and have the time to understand what each one meant. Veth-Sorvain hailed them then. Full broadcast, all standard frequencies, 3 languages including the diplomatic register we used with senior human administrative contacts. There was no reply. First shots were fired at 22,000 kilometers. Not at us. At the lead dispersal carrier, the hull carrying Veth-Sorvain payload, and the round traveled the distance in less than a second, and struck the carrier in the aft dispersal bay and the carrier came apart so completely that what replaced it was not wreckage so much as a new distribution of mass, a fast-expanding sphere of metal and biological compound and atmosphere that glittered in the local sun and then began to thin. I was already moving my survey tender off the convoy track before the second shot was fired. What followed took 11 minutes. I have the complete sensor log. I have reviewed it once, and I do not intend to review it again. I retain the figures, because figures are the only honest way to report what happened. The propagation convoy comprised 41 vessels, 6 dispersal carriers, 12 escort frigates rated at combat capable, 8 logistics tenders, 9 communications and survey craft, 6 support hulls carrying reserve biological material. At 11 minutes and 4 seconds from first shot, 39 of those 41 vessels had been reduced to non-functional status. The 2 remaining were my survey tender and a communications relay drone that the 17 hulls apparently did not consider worth a munition. The 17 hulls expended, as best I could calculate from the power draw readings, less than 40% of their visible weapons capacity over those 11 minutes. They did not maneuver aggressively. They did not divide or scatter. The wedge formation held from the first shot to the last, the geometry unchanged, moving through the convoy the way a hand moves through smoke, without resistance, without adjustment, without any indication that the 41 ships in front of them had presented anything requiring a change of plan. None of the escort frigates landed a meaningful hit. 2 of them attempted ramming approaches. The lead hull did not alter its heading for either attempt. The frigates struck glancing blows on the forward plating and shed themselves apart on impact. I watched the sensor readouts and I understood, perhaps for the first time in my professional life, what it means to say that a hull is armored, not rated, not classified, armored, as in, the metal is so dense, and so deep, and so deliberately constructed to absorb catastrophic mechanical stress, that a frigate traveling at combat, velocity hitting it bow-on registers on its sensor suite as something approximating a minor proximity detonation. After the 39th vessel was neutralized, the 17 hulls stopped. They held position for 40 seconds, could not determine what they were doing. Running diagnostics, perhaps. Or nothing. Perhaps they were simply done and were taking a moment before reorienting. I will never know. I am not sure the distinction matters. Then the lead hull turned. Not toward the target colony, not toward Directorate space. It turned toward my survey tender, and I will tell you plainly that the 11 seconds, during which its bow was pointed at me, directly constitute the clearest thinking I have done in my adult life, because I understood with absolute certainty in those 11 seconds that I was going to die, that there was no outrunning a hull with those drive signatures, and that I deserved it, because I had stamped the dispersal authorization myself and routed it up the chain without a second thought. It did not fire. Instead, a data packet arrived on my communications array. Tight beam, precisely aimed, my tender's receiver code used as the address, which meant they had pulled my vessel's registration from somewhere and targeted me specifically. Packet was small. It contained a single file, a census record, 8,112 names, human names in human script. At the top of the file, a single line in Directorate administrative notation, the format we use for official correspondence, which meant they had someone who knew our bureaucratic grammar well enough to compose in it. The line read, Veth-Sorvain 9 dispersal. Colony Voreth 7, count rendered. Below the names was a number, 41. The hulls did not linger. By the time I had read the file a second time, they were already reforming their wedge. Drives climbing back toward transit power, and I've watched them go on the optical array until they were too small to resolve. And then I watched the space where they had been for a long time. After that, 8,112 names, 41 hulls. The account was settled at a ratio the Directorate's actuarial models had never generated, because the models had assumed, we had all assumed, that the silence meant submission. I filed my incident report. I included the census file as an attachment. I noted, in the supplementary observations field, that the 17 hulls had not hailed us, had not issued demands, had not offered terms. I noted that I did not believe they had needed to.